Welcome to BNEWS Weekly Special Report. I'm Phil Gallagher, and we're very pleased today to have as our guest Burlington's Chief of Police, Michael Kent. Welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
The reason we have the Chief on is because June 30th, he'll be leaving us, entering into his retirement after 11 years of service. We want to review his career and find out what his future plans are. So why don't we begin at the beginning and talk about your early years, how you developed a interest in law enforcement. Where did you matriculate? Where did you start your career?
Sure. I grew up in Granby, Mass, which is right next to Amherst, where I ended up spending a large part of my career. I had an older brother that was on the Springfield Police Department, who since retired as a sergeant, and that got me interested. And the Amherst Police Department at the time had a cadet-type position called a community service officer, where you were required to go to college and work, I believe it was 24 hours a week for the department. So I got in there right at 18, and it kind of took on a life of its own. I did that for 2 years, and then I was in the cruiser at 20, and spent the next 28 years at the Amherst PD. And along the way, I got a bachelor's and a master's degree at Western New England College. Now it's university.
In criminal justice, I presume.
Exactly, yeah.
Not in psychology.
No. And my younger brother actually went into policing also, and he's currently a deputy chief with the Springfield Police Department. So we got 3 in the family that my mother was never too wild about when she was alive, but
she backed the blue, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you betcha. And so after 28 years, I saw a advertisement that Burlington was looking for a police chief.
Well, let's go back. Let's go back before we get you into Burlington. Let's talk about 20 years in Amherst. 28 years in Amherst.
Yeah.
Now at that point, Amherst, I think, had a population in the town of about 4,000, but then you added like 26,000 students. So a lot of your career was involved in policing at the collegiate level.
Yeah. Very busy.
What were some of your experiences there?
Well, I got to go through protests for both Gulf Wars, which involved different type blocking intersections, things of that nature. As with a lot of college campuses, the spring fling type of behavior that in later years kind of developed into riotous behavior. The Red Sox winning the...
yeah, right.
I still remember, I don't know if you're familiar with UMass, but they've got a section of dormitory towers, and I still remember the roar of the last out of the 2004 World Series, and I was about 1.5 miles away.
Both of my children went there.
Okay, so you're well familiar with it.
With the site.
So pretty much in a college community, it's like a mystery movie. You never know what's going to happen next, just because the clientele are young kids and they're very unpredictable.
Well, policing did change in the collegiate environment during your tenure there, particularly as it relates to women. A lot of the things that were detrimental to women on the college campus suddenly no longer were being allowed to be covered up by the colleges.
Yeah, and that was more so within the bowels of the university, Amherst College and Hampshire College, students. We were fortunate that I was the liaison. We had a very good relationship. Every Monday morning or Monday afternoon, I'd have a meeting with the Dean of Students office at UMass, mental health people, a couple other department representatives, where we would go over the weekend's activities, the week's activities, if there were any red flag kids that needed to be addressed. And it was a very cooperative effort between the town and particularly the university, because that's the biggest, obviously. So we had a great relationship.
Now, how large a force you were the chief there?
I was the captain. I was second in charge.
Okay.
When I left, we were 49 officers, I believe. I think they have less now, but.
So you see an ad for Burlington. You're, 100 miles away, right? Yeah. Amherst is 100 miles away?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah, just about, right? So tell us how that developed.
Well, at the people's shock sometimes in town here over the years, I had never heard of Burlington. But I did see the ad, and I remember one morning early, I'm an early riser on a Sunday morning. I hopped in the car, took a ride out here, drove around town. Certainly was interesting, with the business section and the residential. So I said, I'm going to throw a flyer and put an application, resume, cover letter in with this. And lo and behold, it kind of took on a life of its own. I got called in for an interview with a panel, Bob Mercier.
Right.
And
The three chief panel?
Yeah, they had, no, actually there was 5 or 6 people. No, it was 5 or 6. There was a representative from the police department on there, but 5 or 6 other people, I believe Mr. Larkin from the school department. And must have done okay in that interview because I got picked to go to an assessment center.
Right, that's,
which was held in the school committee room, as a matter of fact.
Now, is that the assessment done by the chiefs, other chiefs
Yes.
from other departments? That's okay.
That's a company they hire to come in and do the assessment. And
Now, at the time, there was some problems in the department that was in some disarray. The leadership of the town decided they would look outside. What were you made aware of coming through the door in the interview process as to what needed to be done?
0.
You're on your own.
Yeah, it was quite funny that, and again, in retrospect, I'm glad I didn't, but I probably should have done a little more research on the different things that had happened, but I didn't, and that turned out to be a good thing. And,
no biases coming through the door.
Exactly. I came in, and I think part of the success that we've had as an organization is when I came in, we hit the reset button, and everyone started, at a fresh start for everyone.
Ground zero for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, what was the makeup of the department at that time as far as, captains, and what structural changes have you made in terms of authority within the department?
At the time when I came in, and I was also very fortunate, I had 2 senior captains, Carl Boutwell and George Devlin, that each had 1 year left. They were going to retire, and they were extremely helpful to me. So the department was made up of 2 captains, 5 lieutenants, I believe, a group of sergeants, and then the rest patrolmen. But I was the only one that was a non-union employee, which sometimes causes some issues. And, I started thinking about restructuring the department. And also, Amherst was not a civil service department, so I had never dealt with civil service, and I quickly learned that it's a very cumbersome.
Archaic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I kind of started planting the seed that, civil service is not the end all. And, it took a number of years, and Mr. Mercier retired, and John Petrin came in, and that was something that he was willing to go down that road with the unions and the town. And out of that came a restructuring of the department where we added a deputy chief who was outside the union. Tom Duffy was the first deputy.
But there were other implications as a result, and particularly as it related to diversity and the hiring process.
Yeah.
Explain to us what differences that made and what differences it made in the face of the department.
Well, within civil service, and again, I had never dealt with it before, so it was all a learning curve. I think at one point we had 4 openings, and I asked for a list from civil service, and I got 9 names, I believe. And I remember calling up the HR, Joanne Faust, saying, "Where are the rest of the names to pick from?"
Where's the other 75
She goes,
candidates?
"No, that's it." And so again, that got me thinking quite actively of getting out of civil service. But within the civil service system, there was residence preference, which really cut down on the pool of candidates.
And veterans present.
And a veterans preference also. So by getting out of civil service, it allowed us, and we actually we still have a veterans preference within it, but it's not an absolute preference. Right. And
but it makes sense. I mean, veterans preference makes sense in terms of, firearms and combat, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not absolute anymore?
No, it's not an absolute preference. and we've hired several veterans since we've been out of civil service, but it also allowed us to hire a more diverse candidate that maybe better reflects the overall population of the town, and I'm including in that population a daytime population.
Right.
So we've got a number of minority officers, a number of female officers now, and they're all sharp as tacks, and I'm very fortunate. We got a great crew.
Well, Virginia Mooney famously referred to the Burlington political system as the good old boy network, and of course the police department was the good old white boy network. So that has, the face of the department has changed. How many women have you got? How many minorities have you got, etc.? I know we lost a Haitian fellow, didn't we, to the
Yeah,
state
he
police?
went to the state police.
Right.
Very good officer. The one thing I will say is we have kept, since we've been out of civil service, half our hirees are still local residents, just the way it's worked out. So we have kept the local flavor. I believe we have 8 female officers, 6 or 7 minority officers. I'm thinking because, I don't look at them as you know what I mean? When I'm passing them in the hallway, I'm not looking at them as a minority officer. And frankly, knowing all of them as well as I do, they'd probably be insulted if I was, looking at them that way. Or
the politics of the outside are reflected, hopefully, within the building.
Exactly.
Now, Anne Marie Brown, was she our first, she's certainly our first female detective, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And I think she's our first female officer, if I recall.
She could well be.
Yeah, because
And
she's coming up on retirement, is
She
she
is
not?
the end of June, or the beginning of June, I'm sorry. Yeah, and we'll be losing, she's an excellent detective. And
Well,
does a
that leads
great
me to
job.
the next question, because Anne Marie Brown was involved in a really good pinch on that cyber crime that was, I think, promulgated out of Connecticut somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, my question's twofold here. How did that work out? And secondly, what are the feds doing to help local communities to deal with this crime, which is originating in any place and is preying on elderly people? We're getting constant calls. I mean, the most recent one, I think, is that, well, you always get the call that, your car warranty is running out. So, but the next one has been somebody has spent $700 on your Amazon account, etc. What are you doing, and what are the feds doing to try and eliminate this bank fraud and transfer of the money, etc.?
Well, unfortunately, there's so much of it out there. Unless it's a large amount, the feds aren't really going to get tied into it. If it's something that's of substantial financial or a far-reaching case, they get involved in. Fortunately, we've always had detectives that are, and most of that stuff is over my head, the internet crime, but that are very good in handling that type of crime. And we're fortunate that we've got a very good training program, training budget, where we're able to send people to keep. It's just a constant race to keep up. The good guys figure something out, and the bad guys trump it. And it's just, particularly with cybercrime, and I don't see an end to it.
Yeah, well, probably worse before it gets better.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about that was a great pinch. I think saved the woman $8,000 or $9,000, the victim. What are some of the other categories of crime that have changed in the duration of your service over 20 years?
I think, and this is anecdotally, I think we've had more domestics. I think we've seen an increase in that. I get up.
Well, we probably always had domestic crime, but I think, is policing changing to address it more properly or more effectively?
Yes, but I do think there's been an increase. I mean, I for 11 years now, I get up in the morning, I got a laptop at my house. The first thing I do is bring the log up and read it, and it seems there's more domestics, and also, and I don't know why, whether it's always been there and we just didn't take notice of it, but mental health calls. I mean, we have a log at the station for people with mental health issues, and
Well, the log has probably changed over the years. You didn't log them in as
Exactly.
mental health
Yeah.
calls. You logged them in as a potential criminal call.
So
right?
that is the biggest that I've seen, the mental health, and we're fortunate we have a mental health clinician.
Yeah, well, tell us
who
about that.
works
You
with
have
it.
two different new positions that are
Yep.
involved in mental health, don't you?
We've got well, it's currently we're advertising for a new recovery coach. Margie Taylor, who did a great job for us, moved on a month or so ago.
Was she in on a grant or was she a part-timer?
She was originally a grant, and both these positions are unbenefited 19-hour-a-week positions. So Margie was originally a grant, and then now it's town funded. And then Karen, our mental health counselor, is a grant being funded by the Cummings Foundation. Greg Ski, one of our captains, is a very good grant writer, and he wrote a grant at Cummings.
Tell him I haven't seen him
up.
at the gym in the last 6 months.
I'll let him know.
He made an excuse. He's up in New Hampshire, I think.
So she is grant funded, and actually it runs out the end of this month, and then the town will pick it up. And again, that's a 19-hour-a-week unbenefited position.
That was in your budget this year to
Yes,
get up.
yeah.
Okay. And what are the roles? What roles are each of these people playing?
Well, the recovery coach will, among other things, come out, get someone into rehab, find a bed for someone, help the family understand what's happening, what the person's going through if they don't understand addiction. The mental health counselor will, with a police officer, come out on calls if it's safe, obviously. Deal with the families, get them into the proper avenue to get them the help they need. So they're both very busy, and it's something you didn't know you'd need it until you have it. Now I can't imagine running a police department without those two positions.
And it's for benefit both the department and the victim or the resident who's involved
Absolutely.
in the trauma.
I mean, if you think about it, if you've got a family member with mental health issues, a lot of times it's just like, what do I do?
Right.
And when you can call a professional in and to help you, I mean, it's got to be a godsend.
Particularly if they get upset in a violent condition.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the drug issue for a while. What have you seen in your tenure in terms of it migrating out to Burlington and out to the suburbs? Do you see an increase? Do you see a decline? I know we've had a number of ODs over the years.
Yeah.
Where is it now in your estimation in terms of the log, and what do you see happening in the future?
Well, it's interesting. Since COVID hit, you really don't hear anything about opioid addiction.
That may be the
abuse.
one good aspect of it. Right?
And sadly, I think it's still out there, but everything is being trumped by COVID. And I think it's had a lot to do with people that go to support meetings and things like that aren't able to go. But as far as I haven't seen an increase in our drug trafficking in town. I don't think we're any better than neighboring communities or any worse. But I always use this as an example, and this goes back a number of years. We locked a dealer up who was basically delivering, and again, this goes back a number of years, door to door in town. And one of the people he delivered to told one of my drug detectives, he goes, all you're doing now is forcing me to go to an unsafe place to purchase the drugs. So, and this was a white collar guy. Got a good job, just an addiction issue.
Well, addiction
everywhere.
crosses all, all lines.
Does.
That's for sure.
It absolutely does.
Now, you had a pretty good sized bust a couple of years back on actually a meth lab, I think, right?
Yeah, we've had a few of those over the years.
Was that in a hotel?
Yeah.
And you've had.
And we've got two detectives that are actually trained. They're on a regional task force for meth labs. That's something that, if I was to stumble across one on patrol, you pull back and call the people in, the hazmat suits and everything else to go in there.
Yeah, as we know from Breaking Bad, those things can burn and explode, etc. Right?
Exactly.
And we also had a couple of murders, I think, during your service.
Yeah, 3 or 4, I think, actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
all were solved, as I
Yes.
recall. All were solved. So
Yeah.
we have no unsolved cases except I think the 1958 case, right? which is a good thing, so we don't have any cold case files as
Yeah,
far as
yeah.
murder is concerned. Now let's talk about training. COVID actually enabled you to make another leap forward in training,
Sure.
but start from the beginning. What training advances have been made in the department?
Well, when I got here, we had a good sized training budget, but in talking to the different officers and to get to know the officers when I got here, I'd hop in the car and go midnight to 8. I worked a week of midnight to 8s and hopped in with every cop. Just about killed me staying up those hours. But
Chief's not supposed to do that. It's a
you know,
daylight job.
when you're sitting in a cruiser with someone that's only been on a couple of years at 3 in the morning, you tend to bond a little bit. And but the feeling I got was there wasn't a lot of training going on, and I don't know why. So my attitude was, the old term sprinkle the infield. Let's get as many people involved in training. Let's expose the officers to training in other areas, not necessary. I go by the thing you get what you pay for. And, I can bring in some officer from a neighboring community at a very low rate to teach something that he's going to basically teach out of a book. Or you can travel, get exposure, not only to a top-notch instructor, but to police officers from other parts of the country.
Who are involved in.
So that's what we tried to do. Over the years, for instance, we have a very robust school safety program. We've sent a number of officers every summer out to Columbine High, where they do I went myself the first time, where they do a full program, a full week on school safety. First of all, you're hearing it, you're in a building where terrible things happen, and you're hearing it from people that were involved, and the officers are bringing that back to this community.
Yeah, referring to the mistakes that were made and the various ways that it was handled or could have been handled to mitigate the impact.
So we've been very fortunate in that, and I think we've spread the training out where pretty much anyone who has an aptitude for a particular training, and if it's the right fit, can get that training. And I think we've definitely seen it, the results in the different. We send officers to a homicide school. Now, how many homicides do you have in Burlington? We just talked about it, 3 or 4 over 11 years. But they can take those skills. They get to a scene of a crime. It may not be a homicide, but if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, they're the only ones there. They're going to put those skills into play, not to ruin the crime scene.
Right, 20 people tramping over the crime scene. When a single, ejected shell could make all the difference in an investigation.
So this year led to COVID, which all the trainings was canceled, and Lieutenant Glenn Mills had the idea of renting a simulator. So it's a live shoot, don't shoot, 3 huge panels. We got an area in our mezzanine to put it up, and we prefer to think of it as a de-escalation training, because it's not just all shoot, don't shoot, cops and robber stuff. It's a type of system where you can verbalize, the person will verbalize back to you, and just to train the officers in de-escalation, which.
So it's not a question of how to shoot these days, it's a question of when to shoot, right?
Sure. Or at times, there's scenarios in there where the gun never comes out of the holster. It's all just verbal content.
Yeah, and these are quick developing video in full scale, so that, something that an officer might not encounter.
Right.
Like, how many times did you actually fire your weapon in your career?
Yeah, never.
Never.
Well, and that's the case with 98% of the police.
Percent of the police in the entire country, 98% of the police officers have never fired their weapon. And it's easy to criticize, particularly when you have the media who are exploring these in such great detail, incidences of innocent people or unarmed people being shot. But the numbers, basically boil down to, minuscule in terms of the amount of policing and the amount of crime that's happening, et cetera.
Yeah.
So you still have this in place in the department?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's still there. We leased it for a year, so I think it goes till next December, and then I guess they need to figure out whether funding, whether they're going to keep it or not. But it's interesting. Today we're actually using it. We're interviewing for new police officers, and we're finding with some of these younger officers, the verbal skills aren't what they probably should be, because kids, all they do is text. They don't talk. They text back and forth.
You can't text,
Yeah.
stop.
We're actually using that simulator, and they ran 5 candidates through it today. Not for anything police related, but just to see their thinking pattern, their verbalization on the spur of the moment in a scenario. So, and I'd be willing to bet we're the first police department in the state that's ever used a simulator as part of their hiring process.
So this might, well, but police departments have always used a simulator, but it was the board that snapped up with the guy with the gun, and or the window where the mother with the baby walked by the window. But
this thing is just a state of the art, real life as you can get, I guess.
Right. So you think ultimately this will become a permanent part of the training program?
Again, I can't speak for what's going to happen after I'm done, but I think everyone is very, has wrapped their arms around it, and I think they'll try and figure out a way to keep it.
Well, this hasn't even been at the academy, has it?
No. I think I saw there's 41 police departments in the country that are using it, so it's few and far between.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the building here in the Union School, the former Union School, which was converted to the police station.
Well, it was a bank, wasn't it, before that?
It was a bank, yeah. Well, I went there in the 6th grade, so that was, let me see, I don't even want to think how far back that was, but yes, I can. It was 1962, and it was dilapidated at that time in February when the wind blew. I mean, those big, huge windows would rattle. You'd be freezing in there.
Nothing's changed.
And then we put the Council on Aging downstairs in what used to be the cafeteria when that just started. I can remember numerous complaints there. So what is the condition in your view of the building at this point?
When I got here, one of the first things, and that's one of the first things I brought up, is I felt we needed a new facility. And I describe it as a 100-year elementary school masquerading as a police station.
That's exactly what it is.
And I do have a comparison, because that was, Burlington moved into that station in 1990. My old department, Amherst, built a brand new station in 1990. And I can tell you, even in 1990, that station, the Burlington station, was not sufficient.
It's dilapidated,
so,
sure.
It's in desperate need. Yeah. We're in desperate need for a new police station. It's just, it's, as you said, it's a drafty old building, but it's also, there's situations where it's unsafe. It's not kept up with the times. It's not fair to the public. You have a woman, say you have an older woman that gets in a car accident at the mall that comes in to report it. The officers bringing her in and sitting her on the same bench the prisoners sit on, when they're being booked, to get the info, because we don't have those interview rooms and things.
There's no elevator in the building, is there?
There is an elevator, yeah.
Okay.
But that's the one thing. It's funny. I was not able to get any traction. Every year I bring it up, and I kind of feel like I failed a bit in that thing. We're no better than the day I walked in 11 years ago.
Well, you actually have a new firing range that was re-outfitted.
We rehabbed that range, and the town meeting was very good.
Right. But in an old wooden structure,
exactly,
you have a firing range.
State-of-the-art firing range, yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, we only got about a minute and a half left. Tell us what Mike Kent's future is about.
Well, I want to continue working. I'm just not sure what. I have 11 great years here. The best thing that ever happened to me and my family was the town of Burlington. Considering 12 years ago I had never heard of it. I am forever thankful to the community. It has been warm and welcoming, and my department is, I truly believe, it's the best police department in Metro Boston. Not because of me, it's a team effort. And I don't know what's next, we'll see, but I'm just very thankful I landed in Burlington, and I come to work every day. I still love the job with just a great group of employees. I'm very, very fortunate.
And we've been fortunate to have you. Now, one last question. Are you moving back to farming country out there in Amherst? Oh, you're
Well,
staying in Billerica. You live in Burlington.
Yeah, when I came, I always told people I live in Billerica, but I consider Burlington my home. I sleep in Billerica, but no, I think I'll be staying out here. It's funny, over 11 years, how your life kind of moves across state. And,
Particularly when you have a child.
yeah, exactly. And, I find myself going back there less and less over the years. So I'll be in the area. People will still see me, and, again, just thankful for everything that's happened.
Well, we'll see you out running, certainly.
Absolutely.
You haven't retired from that.
No.
Okay, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank our guest today, retiring Police Chief Michael Kent, 11 years of service in the town of Burlington. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you for joining us.